Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. My name is Edie Lush. Absolutely delighted to be here with you, moderating this session on AI, artificial deception, AI's role in the misinformation age. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to start with what is really important. Taylor Swift. Right? Have I got your attention? Taylor Swift came out after the US presidential debate the other night and said that she was going to be casting her vote for Kamala Harris, in part because of policy issues, but in part because AI-generated pictures of her endorsing Donald Trump were put on Donald Trump's social media site. She said that that was not enough, and she was worried about, that was not okay, and she was worried about misinformation and AI. So, if Taylor Swift is worried, should we all be worried? Let's be absolutely clear, misinformation is nothing new. We all know that story, fiddling while Rome burned. After the great fire of Rome nearly 2,000 years ago, Emperor Nero was accused by his enemies of starting the fire to clear space for his new palace. According to the myth, Nero played music while Rome burned. And of course, that was false news, fake news. Yet here we are centuries later with this legacy still impacting Nero. So, as AI affects every area of our lives, should we be worried? Let's think about AI-generated misinformation entering the financial system. We've got an expert on that for us today. We know, of course, that AI-generated text and images contributed to the spread of false information during the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's discuss. Delighted to be here with entrepreneur, builder of multiple companies, Ramsey Risk. He's built and sold several companies, including one around computer vision. We might hear a little bit about insights about that. And the founder and CEO of Abwab AI, a Saudi fintech startup, Bara Koshak. How are you guys?
Good. Great.
Good. All right, let's get started. Ramsey, how worried are you about AI's role in the misinformation age?
Not so much, to be honest. I mean, it's undeniable that AI, and particularly the last iteration of all of this generative tech, has led to way more content being created that is questionable. I think technology is technology. I think technology is a tool that we need to understand, that we need to adapt. I worry more about people than technology in general. But particularly around the topic of AI and misinformation, beyond the technology that obviously has allowed a lot of content to be created and disseminated, the bigger problem is probably that people are more susceptible to it. And that can date back to social media, actually, not even AI. So if the problem, it's probably more social networks that led to this globally interconnected world where, like Mark Twain said, probably Mark Twain, but that's often a lie can travel around the world while the truth is still getting out of bed.
Right.
And that is sort of what social media has allowed. I think it's a generational thing as well. I think the younger generation is much more accustomed to reading things, ignoring them, maybe because they have a low attention span, but also because they're more aware that not everything should be trusted by default, whereas the older generation grew up in a world where everything printed, everything published was credible, and they tend to believe that a little bit more. You know?
Well, we saw that the other night, didn't we, with Donald Trump saying that he saw something on TV. He saw cats and dogs being eaten on TV by immigrants to the U.S., so therefore it was true, right? Yeah. Now this is, again, another fake news story.
And fundamentally the problem is you take that and then it gets spread.
Yeah.
And you don't know where it ends. Kamala Harris with the earpiece, or emails from Nigerian princes that promise you money. That was way before any of this. I don't think anyone under the age of 40 has ever replied to an email like that.
Right.
I know a lot of people that are older that have, right?
Right.
So I worry more about that, more about the education side of it. It's a bit of a moot point trying to chase the technology and trying to stop it or whatever, because it's like a cat and mouse, virus, antivirus type thing.
You'll detect. Let's stop on that. So virus, antivirus. So you mean that when somebody comes up with a new virus, the antivirus software gets updated?
Yeah, I mean, how that typically works is there's tons of viruses being developed and created, right? And then there's a lot of patches coming out. There's a lot of vulnerabilities being detected in software systems, and then they get patched.
Yeah.
And the question is, do you want to prevent viruses from being created? You can do that by banning people from programming. Or you kind of have to accept that that's the reality that we live in. And there's a lot of tech that can already detect content that is generated from GPT, right? There's a lot of tech that can detect a photo that was generated with Midjourney or DALI. And at some point, these models get better, and then the tech to detect it gets better.
Right.
And that's why I mean cat and mouse, right? But I wouldn't worry about that part per se.
Okay. If we think about misinformation in financial decision making, so is there a concern, or can you tell me at the moment how you deal with AI generated or just people generated misinformation coming into financial decisions, and what could the implication of, if it were to come in, what could the implication of that be?
Absolutely. So the way we think about it is AI is just a tool to generate content. People have been generating content for quite some time, and there has been fraud using AI or using Photoshop or normal tools. The difference is it's quite rapid, and you have the ability to generate that content at mass. For us in financial sector, for example, we have been detecting fraud using photoshopped bank statement or financial statements or documents. And it's the same thing to detect basically content that is generated using ChatGPT or generative AI content.
Right.
So for us, it doesn't really matter what kind of fraudulent behavior is happening, be it using generative AI or using manual methods. The detection is what's important, and the utilization of these tools to identify these misinformation that's happening in the financial sector or beyond is critical for us to have a healthy economy, basically.
So do you have the same issue around the kind of cat and mouse issue? Do you see people getting more sophisticated when they're trying to put in fraudulent information when they're asking for credit, for example?
No, absolutely. So just to elaborate on that, we offer basically underwriting automation technology to automate the credit decisioning. And in that process, it's very critical for us to detect any kind of fraudulent activity that's happening. But I mean, the manual methods of fraud is basically you open the bank statement or financial statement, you open Photoshop, and you change the amount and you change the balances. It's quite manual, and that's why usually there's a discrepancy in the statement or in the documents that you can identify easily. With generative AI, it's a bit more tricky because it's generated using a machine that is probably trained in generating this content in a much more realistic way. And this is where we at Abab, we combat basically that kind of generated content that is fraudulent by using also AI that is making sure and cross-checking these documents with other pieces of information about these businesses that are applying for loans to be able to check from a behavioral point of view, is it fraudulent or not, basically.
And you still have humans in the loop, right?
Yeah, so the way we mitigate any kind of misinformation in the financial sector is, one, when we build the models, we make sure that they're trained on a mass kind of data set so that it's not skewed towards a specific behavior. And then second is we have a human in the loop, as you mentioned, where we basically, for every credit decision we recommend, we have a human that is generating that decision, and we reconcile them and check for any kind of discrepancies between them. And then third is basically we have kind of like a no-go kind of space where we have rules and business validations that, for example, a retail business that has been operating for 3 months shouldn't access $500,000 capital at start. And these rules just flag any kind of extreme anomalies in the decision making, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Ramzi, one of the companies that you've built has an interesting name, and I'm going to get you to tell me about that. And you've thought a lot about community building, and with that comes building of trust. So is there a point at which a community is too large to trust each other? And is that when we start to get things like misinformation, AI generated or otherwise, becoming a problem?
Absolutely, and we see it today in this polarized world that we live in. So the company was called Dunbar, and Dunbar is a social anthropologist who essentially researched groups of humans throughout history and came up with this rough numbers that say you have around 5 very close contacts, around 20 good friends, and so on, and then 150 people that you know intimately, and so on and so forth. And that 150 number is a very interesting one. I mean, obviously it's not exact, but that 150 number is a very interesting one because beyond that, trust dissipates to a certain extent. A certain level of anonymity comes in. What he calls a psychopathic behavior starts to emerge, lies, deception, and so on and so forth. And it's kind of understandable, right? As humans, we are social animals, and the way we evolved and became the apex predator on this planet is through collaboration.
Right.
As sad as that may sound, right? Individually, we're very weak, but as a community, we're quite strong. Now, with social media and social networks today, the level of anonymity is, I think, the biggest problem, right? People feel very safe to provoke, or very safe to fake, or to troll, or to create botnets that want to spread misinformation here and there, which is something that you just simply cannot do in a community of trust, right? Because that would be a black sheep that would be cast out. So absolutely, I think intimate communities, or at least trying to figure out what the patterns of those intimate communities are, and how to reflect that back into today's society, and what to learn, and how to observe and evolve and adapt to kind of the changing media landscape is fundamental, right?
I want to make sure we bring in the audience if you have a question or something to add, a point to add. So we've got one just here. And if you could say your name and where you're from, sir.
Yeah, hello, thanks very much. So my name is Dr. Daniel Ani from the United Kingdom. Program reading cybersecurity and AI from Keele University. So I do agree with my friends here. I'm listening. Quite interesting. I mean, the idea of the problems we're seeing with misinformation, disinformation, or if you'd rather talk about it as fake news. So one of the problems because I am working in this space as well, and I've got students, we're exploring research, and we're doing developments also to address this kind of thing. One of the problems we are having at the moment, and we're working on, and I think it's a general problem with AI, especially talking about the data or the data sets, okay, is this issue around concept drift, if you get what I mean. So we understand people who are responsible or driving some kind of mischief from the financial services sector would want to do certain things. So over time, we're able to build patterns and understand, so the models are able to learn this pattern. But I was just wondering if there are things you're doing or how you've managed to address the issues around if over time the patterns begin to change. So these bad people, they're also smart. So over time they know you're looking at this and this and this, and the data sets are looking at that and that and that. Yeah. And over time they begin to change. Are we responsive towards those kind of changes?
Okay.
And how are we looking at it in the concept of using AI?
How fast are you iterating? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. The way we think about it is that AI is just an abstraction of an efficient decision-making machine. Similar to how humans make decisions, it's the same. It's just a different, efficient way of making that decision. And to govern these decisions of, for example, extending credit or not to this business, even if they change their behavior, is similar to how you govern credit decisions with humans, where you have a reviewer, a human in the loop, to basically audit. For example, every 10 credit decisions that we produce, we have someone that produce them manually and reconciles and checks. Is there an anomaly? Is it not consistent? And if it's not, why is that the case? And how can we use that to retrain the model and improve the decisioning? What I'm trying to say is that don't think of it as a machine that is better in decision making. Just assume it's an efficient machine that produces decisions. And similar to how you can manage the quality of decisions with humans, you can do the same with technology.
Yeah, just in the front here, and then there. Can we have the mic, please? Just in the front.
Thanks. My name's David Wood from London Futurists. My question is about whether there should be more legal penalties for people who create or pass on misinformation. So I have a Taylor Swift story of my own.
Nice.
Very sad story, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm sorry.
3 young girls were at a dance class for Taylor Swift, this kind of dancing in England recently, and there was somebody who came and shot them.
Yeah.
But the worst part was that immediately afterwards, somebody posted on social media, the guy who did this was a Muslim who had just arrived in the UK. And it stirred up huge riots all over the UK. People came out and were attacking Muslims, attacking mosques, and so on. Complete chaos. So should the people who made that story or who passed it irresponsibly, including some politicians who shared it without checking, should they be held liable? Should they be sent to prison? After all, we already have laws against false news in advertising. You can't claim things in advertising that are not true. In financial statements, if you make something about your company that's untrue, you can go to jail. Should some of these people go to jail as part of the human response rather than the technical response to misinformation?
So some issues around policy regulation. Yeah, Ramsey,
I'd love to take that. Thanks for the question. So it's a slippery slope, right? I think it's a very, very dangerous slippery slope. And a lot of it is personal opinion. I mean, Bara is talking facts. This is my personal opinion. I think there needs to be distinction between what is fake and what is biased. And there needs to be a distinction between that because where do you police and where do you stop? And what about free speech? And where does that end, right? Comparing a human being to a company is a bit difficult. I know US politicians like to do that, but as a company, you can't report fake numbers, that's for sure. As a person, I can go and say, theoretically, whatever I want within the constraints of the law. I mean, obviously, it's horrible, and living in Germany, I see that happening day in and day out. But I would say if, gut feeling, rationally, I would say no, because where do you draw the line? And how is that leading to a world where everything you say is controlled because you can be punished for disagreeing with the orthodoxy of whatever it is, right? We saw that during COVID as well, a lot of COVID misinformation, but also a lot of things that were just taboo, which to me worries me just as well because freedom is something that we value and cherish. So it's difficult. It
does bring us into this issue around financial digital literacy, right? And how quick should we be to share something? Should we not be training ourselves on how to fact check? And there's I've seen some interesting models around this. So for some newspapers, for example, you can't share an article unless you've actually read it, right? Or opened it and had it open on your screen for some time. But there's some other things that we can do, right? There's something around Twitter communities. Parad, do you want to weigh in? Or
go for it.
I mean, Twitter community notes is one of those things. We might not like Elon, but that definitely is something valuable. Wikipedia has been doing something similar for quite some time. It doesn't cancel out manipulation, but at least there's a chance for people to voice against it. I think fundamentally it's about literacy. Fundamentally, and this applies to what Bara was saying as well, we need to understand what AI is, what these technologies are, what social networks allow us to do, and not in this mystical kind of magical creature type thing, but genuinely understand that we live in an age where pretty much anything can be faked, so nothing should be taken at face value. We need to live in an age where we kind of double check our sources, and particularly it's almost like in an airplane, right? You put your face mask on before you help your neighbor. I think we need to start ourselves just by making sure that we don't spread things that seem good and agree with some position that we have without double checking. that
But it
the
is
source is
interesting
valid.
to think about, is there some kind of, I don't know, social stigma if you share something that ends up causing a riot, causing a, fire in a, crowded building? That's what the U.S. Constitution has been deemed to be. Free speech is okay, but you can't call fire in a crowded building. That isn't all right. So there maybe is something around that. There was a question here. Just here.
Hey, so introduce myself?
Please.
Okay, so my name is Kun, and I come from China and from Tsinghua University.
Welcome.
So, thank you. So, for my question is, so I'm pretty interested in about just like the community management, community. So, because right now, my team and we just focused on the community management. And for AI is a tool, but for the residents, if they want to join it, when they know, I say just maybe in China or maybe elsewhere, so they will say, hey, so who is the leader of this community? Is the tool, is the machine, or is the person? It's a real individual. So if just like someone say, hey, it's just like a machine, just like the leader for us, oh no, I don't want to join it. We want a real person. And he is just like the real humanity. And he can just help us to select, or he may be like a selector, to let us avoid just like the misinformation. We trust this guy. We don't trust this machine. So my question is, who will be the future leader of a community? Is AI machine or still a real person? Thanks so much.
All right. Who's going to lead us? Anyone want to take that one on?
Taylor Swift?
Who do you think is going to lead us?
I think just like I trust just for myself. I trust a person,
You trust a
a
person?
real leader.
Yeah.
So if he can just create, just from him, he can just create a machine as a tool for my community, that will be the best leader for me and for my community. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. We've got more. We've got a person here and then there. Just the second one here. And then we might wrap. Yeah.
Hassan Smadi from Nokia. So my question about misinformation and the thin line between free speech, as you highlighted, and where the companies or the social media providers, AI modules that control the viral of such video or such information. So when an information or a misguided misinformation is being spread, there is a module, AI module, try to promote for advertisement, and at the same time there is the moral rules where things cannot be spread if it's personal, if it's a certain information that cannot be spread. As you mentioned, an article, you have to read it.
Right.
There is always a fight between fight for the ads and promote the information first, and the other one to take a time, make sure the data is authentic, or go with the values and respect of the privacy. So how this two angles can be
breaking
compromised.
news versus the more in-depth story. Yeah. Okay. Let's just take one more and then we'll wrap up here.
Good morning. My name is Alan Smeaton, professor at Dublin City University. I'd like to go back to a couple of the things you mentioned earlier. You indicated that it was a cat and mouse game between the technology producing and then the cat catching up. But the mouse is always ahead and the cat is always chasing this, unless the cat has been eaten by some rats, but that's something you mentioned. So one of the things about misinformation and disinformation is that you can never use the technology to indicate that it is false or true in its own. It is always the context around it. Taylor Swift endorsing Donald Trump could be on its own a piece of news, but we know the history of that, and it is that makes it disinformation. The Pope wearing a puffer jacket, synthesized last year, Pope would never wear it, but it is not the information per se. So the detection of misinformation and disinformation is never done by looking at the item itself. It's the history, the environment, and the context that gives us that indication of what is and what is not false.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to respond to what you've heard there?
Yeah,
Hurrah.
absolutely. The way, I want to go back to the abstraction of what is this new technology. Any new technology that comes, be it AI or let's say internet in general or TV, for example, it's just a tool to introduce some sort of efficiency. Now, how people behave in leveraging that tool is not something that can be necessarily controlled or governed. It takes time for it to settle in, and then people will be able to distinguish between, okay, fake content, generated content, or actually truth. I don't know if Ramzi, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I give thanks to both, and shout out to Nokia. That was my first internship ever, programming games back in, God knows. I think I agree with what you're saying. Context matters, broadly speaking. But fundamentally, we need to look at incentive structures, and that is where the true problems lie, right? We will never be able to stop technology. The cat's out of the bag. Pandora's box is open. I don't even think we should regulate. I don't even think we should go and say ban this and stop that because, again, another slippery slope. Who decides? We need to understand the incentive structures. We need to understand the incentive structures of media platforms, of social media, social networking, and we need to understand and educate the people about specifically that, right? When you know that a platform like Twitter lives off of eyeballs, they need people to look at things and to click at things. They are not incentivized to promote the truth. They are incentivized to promote whatever sells. Most people don't understand that, right? Most people don't understand that when they post on Facebook, they're not sharing an opinion within their living room with their friends. They're the crazy person on the street corner screaming at random strangers. If we educate people on how these things work, why they're there, and try to reassess the incentive structures, I think that is the way forward. And that applies to both how the news is spread, what kind of news is being generated, and why it's being generated, right?
Yeah. No, I second that. And maybe just one last thing. I think, Ramzi, maybe the way I've been perceiving this recently is there's a lot of hype around addressing a potential problem that's going to happen. We still don't know. This technology is new, and we're still digesting it and seeing how is it going to land in our day-to-day life. And I think people have been always receptive to change in behavior in a positive way to address the new anomalies and changes that are happening from this technology. Similar to how the internet has been introduced to the world, similar to how TV and radio have been introduced to the world.
Interesting. Okay, I think we got 2 minutes. We got one more question to answer.
There's a question there.
Question back there, yeah.
That was such a beautiful answer.
Huh?
Such a beautiful answer. Should end here.
Thank you, guys. And Kevin Rath from Switzerland. Today we look at AI as a tool, as a machine, and so on. If you go 10 years forward, 2 decades, 3 decades, this screen is going to go away. This is not going to be long around. Therefore, I, as a human, I'm going to be connected to the cloud, let's say, whether you put a cap on or somehow you're connected to the cloud.
The chip in the brain, yeah.
Chip in the brain, for example, whatever it is, your brain, your biological brain is going to be connected to the non-biological AI. And then how we do distinguish between the discussions we have now, human, AI, versus superhuman powered by AI.
Yeah.
How do you see that? No, we are going to be, in the future, in the point that we are inseparable. AI is not going to stay in the laptops and mobile phones forever.
Yeah. We'll be connected, and then therefore, how do we distinguish between the misinformation? There's a great book by Neil Stephenson, one of my favorite authors, around how when we are connected, when we have these chips in our brains and information is on a constant inflow, actually we're still going to need humans to sift through the misinformation that's passing through. But you guys, what thoughts?
Couple of anecdotes. How many people have their phones in their hands right now in the audience?
Exactly.
Those are the only ones that heard what I was saying, the ones that were on their phone. No disrespect, it's just we're already there, right?
Yeah.
Thought number one. Thought number two, AI researchers since the 60s have been saying 10 years until the singularity, 15 years. It's a sliding window that has been sliding. You know, thought number three, if someone from 100 years ago came into this room, he would think we're superhuman.
Exactly.
We know so much more than, but we're not, right? We just have access to more. And thought number four, which I think is the most crucial one, we should not convey superhuman, supernatural powers onto what is effectively a highly probabilistic brute force engine that is just efficient, right? They're not conscious, they're not humans, they're not, you know, we don't know what consciousness is, but it's definitely not ChatGPT. So I wouldn't worry about that. I would just embrace that this is just augmenting us into the future.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I second that, and I think like as humans, we're really good in adapting to different environments. I mean, we used to live in the desert, we used to live in the jungles, and we're just really equipped with adapting with different environments. The technology that's going to come, regardless of how it looks and how it's shaped and how is it integrated in our life, we will figure out a way where it normalizes and it becomes a positive contribution to our living in an efficient way, and that will make us live a more meaningful life, such as today. Like if we compare, I don't know, the average lifespan of a human today versus 100 years ago, it's more than
30
double.
years ago,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good to end on a note of optimism. Thank you so much to the audience, and thank you so much to Ramzi and Barat for joining us here. We've sorted it all out, AI in the misinformation age. All right, thank you so much.